All right. Thank you for joining again. We'll go ahead and begin. I developed this workshop because I was getting a lot of other veterans that were saying they were having, I don't know how to talk about myself. I might be a little introverted, and naturally, I don't know how to begin a conversation about me or during training, military training, and their life in the military. The focus was not on the individual, but the team, right? Or the focus was on the mission. So a lot of those conversational skills and interpersonal skills were, from training, but now in the civilian world, folks are being called to a whole different way of behavior. So happiness, you're my sole first uh, participant in this workshop, so I really do appreciate you being here. If you don't mind, if you could let me know what service you were in, or are you a veteran, and you can put that in the chat. Okay, that's fine. And we've got a couple other, or one more person joining us. So just asking if you are a veteran, if you could put in the chat what your branch was of service. Just a chance to kind of get to know each other a little bit. Okay, and you don't have to, so that's perfectly fine. Okay, so your healthcare. Okay. Chesney was in the Army. Great. All right. And we've got some other folks coming in. Hi, Kathleen. Thanks for joining. We're just doing a little time to get to know each other. And if you are a veteran, if you could put in the chat your branch of service, or if you're not a veteran, maybe what prompted you to join this presentation, just to know a little bit about what your expectations are and what I could do to help. As you're doing that, we will go ahead and continue with our opening slide. I want to make sure that you all know that we will be allowing, if you need to get up and take a walk around or get a drink of water or take a break, that's perfectly fine. I do appreciate that opportunity for you to take care of yourself. And through this presentation, if you have any suggestions or any comments which would make this a better presentation, or maybe other topics you would like to have for our veterans, please let me know. You can email me at careers@wgu.edu. All right. Now, again, this is strictly directed toward veterans, although you will be able to get some ideas of some communication skills. But typically, the takeaways from this presentation will be tips to excel at communicating in civilian environments, ability to strengthen relationships both personally and in career settings, and to build confidence in group conversations. So I like to explore why veterans shy away from talking about themselves. What is it that might be blocking that ability for that communication? Two major areas would be PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, or the suffering from TBIs, which is traumatic brain injury. These are two very different circumstances that could be happening. Somebody can have PTSD but no traumatic brain injury. But if you have a traumatic brain injury, you could also be suffering from PTSD. So another interesting fact about this is that typically PTSD is a traumatic disorder that is more internal. It's more emotional. It could be psychological from a number of sources, right? A TBI is actually physical damage to the brain. That could be concussive damage. It could be from roadside bombs. It could be from explosions of other kinds. It could be from weapons fire. There was an interesting story. I think it was on 60 Minutes, where there's one individual who had a TBI because he was training. He was an instructor at a base, and they were using high caliber weapons, weapon systems, and he was training like 3 or 4 times a day every day. So he was getting these concussive, micro blows from these weapons all the time, and so that resulted in a traumatic brain injury. I don't believe the report said he had PTSD, but again, very interesting for that. And I appreciate looking at the chat, so appreciate folks coming in and voicing their time here. Okay, great. Tell me about yourself is usually the question they ask. Yeah. So good happiness. I appreciate the link. I will look into that. So I appreciate that. And Chesney, I'm sorry. Good. All right. So other areas that I'm hearing from other veterans and from others who work with veterans is that it could be a difficulty transitioning to civilian life, and the culture. The culture is very different, right? I mean, if you're a veteran, you know that the military culture is very different than the civilian culture. And so that could be a little bit of a difficulty to transition. So jumping into student groups, jumping into conversations with other people may not be as easy as those who do not come from a military background. Social isolation. And the social isolation, again, can be that sense of, I'm, you don't understand, you're not going to be, sympathetic to my situation in the military, what I had to go through. So I'll stand in the wings. I'll be in the shadows. I'll be by myself until I absolutely have to engage or interact with other people. Difficulty expressing emotions, because in the military at that time, we didn't have to. That was not part of the job description. But now that comes out. A lot of the experiences in the military could sort of bubble over, so to speak. So when you're asked, how do you feel? They say, I don't know. I don't want to tell you how I feel. It doesn't matter how I feel, but this is what I think. So the difference between asking somebody, how do they feel and how do they think, can result in different responses or different results. If you know a person may be a little bit more introverted and they don't seem to be somebody who wants to talk about how they feel, then you can start the conversation, or you can get feedback by saying, hey, what do you think about this? It's hard to decide which is which, but I think if you're in doubt of which one do I use with, I don't know this person, then you might just start with, what do you think about an idea or something like that. Protecting loved ones, friends, and family. So again, with couples, if one of the spouses asks about, they don't tell me about their military life, they don't talk a lot about their experiences. It could be because they're like, I'm gonna protect you by not talking about what I had to go through. So you don't really want to know the horrors of war or what I had to go through training. So I'm just going to keep it to myself. And there are other ways that could be expressed. You can't understand because you weren't there. Could be the mentality. Or it was bad enough for me when I was going through this, so I'm just going to leave it on the battlefield. And then lastly, it could be that OPSEC mentality. OPSEC is operational security. So it is, I'm only going to talk to people about this for those who have a need to know, and you don't have a need to know. So I'm going to keep it to myself. Now, these are not, exhaustive, right? These are just some ideas that typically come to the surface when we're talking about communication or the lack of or shying away from talking about themselves. And again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about things that can be barriers for veterans when they're in interviews, or and when we do a mock interview and ask, tell me about yourself. They are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to talk about myself. That's not what I was trained to do in the military. On my resume, at the top of your resume, you've got that summary of qualifications. That's your 30-second commercial. It's also another barrier where I hear from veterans here at WGU, and they say, I don't know how to create this. I don't know how to work with this. I could tell you what I do, but I can't tell you who I am. So that is our topic today, in talking about ways that can be barriers and maybe some strategies to begin to reflect on and work through those barriers. This slide shows at least 4 differences in communication styles. And I won't read the entire thing, because you'll get a copy of this video and you can go back and look at this a little bit more in depth. But the first one to the left is called passive communication. And that passive communication is really kind of the avoidance of expressing opinions or needs. So if people look like they have a blank on their face in a conversation, it could be they're bored, we don't know, or it could be they're just absorbing the information and they're just being passive. There's nothing good or bad about it. However, it could lead to maybe your unmet needs if you're not expressing yourself, if this is part of your communication style. It could build resentment from other people who don't know what you're thinking and they think that you're just being rude, or it could lead to a sense of low self-esteem. Now, these are not always the cases, but they could be drawbacks that are in a situation. The next one could be what's called aggressive communication, and it's kind of in your face, that forceful, demanding expression of opinions. You're going to hear what I have to say, even if you don't like it, kind of way. That can have its own drawbacks, create hostility, can really damage trust in relationships, or it could lead to a high turnover of either somebody in the workplace not wanting to work with somebody who's that aggressive, or the person themselves who think that they're really not being listened to. They may think it's a toxic environment even for themselves, and they may decide to leave that particular position. Now there's passive aggression. There's passive aggressive communication. This is that indirect expression of anger and frustration, avoiding direct confrontation. Sometimes this is hidden in humor, where people will say something and they think it's humorous, but it's really kind of a slap in the face to the other person. The drawbacks here could lead to confusion. Why is he acting like that? Why is she saying stuff like that? It's obvious that they are, not a happy person, but they're smiling and they're joking, but they're making the whole conversation a joke. That could lead to mistrust and really some maybe unresolved conflicts. And of course, it could damage relationships. Then what we want to move to could be that assertive communication. Now, assertive does not mean aggressive. So assertive is really characterized by clear, direct, respectful expression of opinions and needs. We want the benefits from this kind of style to really promote that mutual respect for the other person, to effectively come into problem solving skill sets. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Higher self-esteem, and then also building and maintaining better relationships. So when we're looking at the comparison and maybe contrast of military communication versus civilian communication, we could know that under the military communication, it's more direct, it's concise, you're focused on the mission or the task. There's a hierarchical structure in that communication style. There's a large use of jargon or acronyms in the military culture. There's more of a formal tone to addressing maybe your superiors. Obviously, your superiors, yes, sir, no, ma'am. As you probably know, I'm a veteran myself, And I still say that to everybody. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. Yes, sir. Um, Emphasis on precision and accuracy. You know, when you approach a team huddle or you approach anything with another military member, especially if you're in a group meeting or a briefing, you want to be precise. You want to have your facts as much as possible, be as accurate as possible. Now, on the civilian side, that communication could be maybe indirect and more conversational. It could focus on building relationships. How are you? How are you today? How's your day going? Things of that sort. Less formal structure. In the civilian world, folks might say, hey, hey, Colin. In the military culture, don't say, hey, Colin. you know, by rank or sir or whatever is appropriate. But interesting contrast with those two areas. On the civilian side, there is an emphasis during the conversation maybe to be a little bit more diplomatic, empathetic to the other person. If the conversation seems to get heated, we try to de-escalate that a little bit, try to understand from the other person's perspective, perhaps. More informal tone, tolerance for ambiguity. It's okay to not know. You could be kind of in the gray, and then a focus on the collaboration. So there's always that. It's a conversation and not necessarily a monologue, right? You want to go back and forth and find out what the other person is thinking. This is interesting. When we're looking at and breaking down some of the facts of the conversations, words and content make up 7% of the conversation. You would think it would be more. Voice and tone and sounds and utterances, 38% of the conversation. But body language and visual cues can take up to 55% of the conversation. These numbers come from a number of sources that we could find out there. So if you look that up yourself, you'll probably find some similar results to this. And we'll talk a little bit about body language in just a moment. But what are the benefits of a stronger communication style that's here? Well, in your personal life, that's going to be obviously improved social connections, reduced isolation because you're getting out there, getting out in the world, right? You want to be able to have a good engagement with conversations. Doesn't have to be deep, doesn't have to be a lot, but just to be present during those times. Enhanced self-awareness. What do you think about the conversation or the topic? How are you? Again, this is internal dialogue. How are you feeling about this? You feel angry? You feel frustrated? You feel confused? You feel okay? So as much as we know about ourselves, what's going on inside of us, we can then choose how we're going to react or not react. Improved mental health. So that improved mental health could be that self-esteem, that ability to accept, where you are at this particular moment. You just feel better about yourself or not. And to say, I'm really struggling with more of these kinds of, interactions with other people. Maybe I need to get some assistance, and there are lots of different vet outreach resources, right? Through the VA, if not through the VA, Wounded Warriors, other organizations. Even we here at WGU have a helpline for folks who may want to talk about just some things. And it's free and it's really available to all students. And then some good benefits in personal life can be, conflict resolution. Just, if things get kind of heated or you have an argument with a coworker, perhaps, or family member, there are ways to really address that without getting angry, shouting, and leaving the room or anything like that. So on the professional life, obviously, good communication skills can benefit your career for advancement, being a good coworker in the workplace, teamwork, Obviously, if you're in a team and collaborating, you want to have some input there. So being able to listen and communicate, which are two sides of the same coin, can be very helpful. If you're in the leadership role or you're bringing those leadership skills from your military experience, then that could be very helpful as well. Job satisfaction, again, problem solving, conflict resolution, that workplace culture. And every industry will have a difference in their workplace culture in how communication happens. So you might find that out if you have an HR department, if you're in a work environment that has an HR department and they have maybe some employee workshops or benefits and they talk about their culture, that could be something really useful to tap into. And then, of course, having good communication skills on the job or in your professional life can help with resilience and adaptability. And that's something that does and can cross over to the military communication styles, because those of us who are in the military, and maybe you in your workplace, you're going to be in situations where we need to be resilient, especially today in today's workforce and what's happening in the workforce today. We all need to be resilient and we need to adapt to those changes. Not easy, but necessary. Now, effects on strong communication skills and also interpersonal skills, that wheel to the right is something that we call social and emotional learning. And this is really being implemented into a lot of workplaces today, but also here again at WGU, part of your student resources that you have, and I believe in your handbook, you can access these to find out more about developing a greater self-awareness. How can you make more responsible decision making? How to build that in an ethical way, constructive way, and that can benefit both your personal and social behaviors. Building and strengthening those relationship skills to make them more positive, dealing more effective with ambiguity, with conflicts. And to do that, that could be that social awareness. Now, the social awareness, and then again, connecting that to our military training, could also be that situational awareness. What's around you? What environment are you in? Who's walking down the street? I was in expeditionary skills on the Marine side, and we had to go through a number of exercises in the field, and then going through, it's like, what's not right here? You know, are you going to step on a bomb? Going through a tripwire, being hyper aware of what's around you. And then again, that self-management, you know, when you're in a situation and you feel uncomfortable, or you're beginning that anger, or that, you know, those feelings are welling up, what can we do with that self-awareness and self-management to help manage that particular situation? Now, here's a question that just popped in from Kathleen. How do they, meaning veterans, transition to a desk job if their past life is being, you know, adrenaline junkie? You're right. Is impulse control challenging since they might crave more stimulation due to past life? Suddenly, life is a much slower pace. That's exactly right, and that's an excellent point. So I think that is part of that, maybe that social awareness, but also that kind of training, and even talking to their manager to say, you know, I love this job. I really enjoy this, but, you know, I really do want to look for something that's going to be a lot more interactive with others that could help feed into that need for, you know, something a little bit more challenging and not just a desk job. If it is and they don't have those opportunities, I would still talk to your manager, to your leader, to see what can be done. Or maybe there's something outside of work that that individual needs to do to get that. Where do you get that fed? Do you play sports? Do you work out? Are you doing something more with, you know, with friends and family that is a little bit more active? So that work-life balance could also balance that as well. So excellent. Thank you so much for that question. So again, self-awareness is probably the top thing that could be helpful. Approachability. So on the workforce, or just in life in general, as these skills and these things are being built or reinforced within you or the veteran, you want to be approachable. You want your team or even your coworkers to say, "Hey, I can go to Cliff because he listens. He's focused on what I have to say, or he knows what he's doing, and he can help teach me or kind of coach me in my situation." So I can approach him, and he welcomes that opportunity. And the receptivity of feedback. Somebody might come to me to say, "Hey, Cliff, you're doing a good job with this, but I think you could do this better." My first impulse may be, "Oh, I failed," or, "Oh, I didn't do what I was supposed to do." I may shift over to the negative instead of saying, "Hey, this is just making you a better worker. Are you open and receptive to the feedback, or am I being taking it personally? Am I being defensive?" Again, that goes back to that self-awareness and that self-management part of the SEL. Now, to go down a little deeper, dig a little deeper with this in the communication skills, we all need to try to practice active listening skills. So those active listening skills are going to deal with eye contact, paying attention, not having your phone out, not fidgeting or looking at the ground or distracted by something around you. So that mental focus on the person talking is one skill within active listening. Again, body language, and we mentioned body language earlier. So if somebody's talking and I'm standing there with my arms crossed, or I'm sitting down while they're standing, or I'm standing while they're sitting down, that can put out all kinds of messages. It could put out the message that I'm closed, my arms are crossed, I'm protecting myself. If somebody is sitting down and I'm standing and there's a chair there, that could be what's called a power over. It could be, I'm standing over you. I am putting myself in this, power over position. So that could get the wrong message. If there's a chair there, I'm going to sit and try to be at the same level as that person. And mirroring back. So if we're having a conversation, I may take a moment to repeat back to what you're saying so that that individual knows that I'm listening. I'm tracking the conversation, and I'm absorbing, the content of what you're saying, what you're talking about. Asking questions a little bit. "Oh, that's really interesting, Cliff. You're from Dallas. Did you go to the state fair last year?" So that could open up a conversation or continue to open the conversation, take it a little deeper. But I don't want to interrupt, unless it's something that's like, "Oh, Cliff, 1 second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a question about that." So that could be okay as long as you kind of give those clues for that. But asking questions, Dale Carnegie said at one time, "If I want you to be interested in me, I need to be interested in you." So those questions, that listening skills, being respectful, that could really be able to build that foundation. Showing empathy, when somebody says something that might be, really sad, if somebody has passed away or their pet died, or, something, they got a ticket on their way to work, showing empathy to that person is also a very helpful skill. But to be clear and concise as much as possible, to let them know if you're giving instructions specific or particularly, you want to be clear. And then continuously asking, does this make sense? Or do you have any questions yourself? And then emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence, again, can go back to those social emotional awareness, knowing what's going inside of you, things of that sort. So lots of ways to find out more about emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. And that could be simply doing a Google search, you even using AI. If you use a Chat GPT, and just put in the prompt, what are skills related to emotional intelligence? You can get a lot of information there. So lots of resources to do a little bit more of a deeper dive going forward. So some strategies for improvement can include seek and be open to feedback. Um, we do a at least a half year and a full year feedback with our team and with our manager. So if you have that kind of reporting at your place, or you have it before, if you're in the military or we're in the military, then you know what a fit rep is, right? You know what a fitness report, to where we do get that feedback from our superiors for that. But to be open to that kind of feedback as a way of growing and learning could be a really good tool to use. Attending workshops and courses, that could be from LinkedIn Learning, Coursera. Uh, every student at WGU has a free access to LinkedIn Learning, and there are lots of wonderful workshops that are there. We have some workshops on SEL tools. We have workshops even on interview practices, interview strategies can help with communication skills. And I'll show you where you can find those events as well. Practicing those active listening skills that we talked about earlier. And again, when you get this video, if you want to go back and look at those and do more research on the individual ones, that'll give you some areas to practice on. Observing positive interactions. And what I mean by that is, if you know somebody that's, it's like, wow, they're a good communicator. I love to listen to their stories. Something like that, or even on TV. If it's somebody who could be a model for you, just keep listening. What is it that makes them a good communicator? What is it that draws your attention to how they tell stories or interact with others? And then that will give you something to emulate, something to bring into your own, kind of absorb, as I say. And then again, displaying that open body language. Have your hands open or your arms open, that is. I don't know if you knew this. I thought this was very interesting. When we shake hands, you go to shake hands, you want to, and even for men and women, do what I call web to web. That's between your forefinger and your thumb. You want your web to meet the other person's web. So don't do like a limp fish kind of shake. Go and just give a good hearty handshake. Don't break their fingers. It doesn't have to, but be able to give a good handshake. The background from that actually kind of goes back to some medieval times, to where if I'm shaking your hand, I'm not holding a weapon. I'm not holding a sword or a knife or something like that. So it's a social convention, if you will, to where it's like, you're in a safe place. I'm not going to kill you, at least not now. So that's just interesting. But again, goes back to that open body language skill sets. And on constant improvement, ongoing improvement of our own emotional intelligence. And then prioritizing that communication, practice, right? Practice, practice, practice. Take little steps if you need to. But the more we work on these, I think the better we become. The better we get in the social interaction, the better we get in our own mental health or self-esteem, and hopefully the better relationships that we'll be building and maintaining. So be mindful of your own reactions. Avoid generalizations or assumptions in communication. Be mindful of your own tone of voice. How are you, when we get upset, our tone of voice may raise, our volume might raise when we get excited. So if you're catching yourself and you're noticing that, that's where that mindfulness reaction can come in, and then just kind of bring it down a few notches. And then always be patient. We got to be patient with ourselves and be patient with others. It takes time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Um, so just give yourself some grace, what you may say. Here are some next steps and some resources and groups and clubs to join. Toastmasters, and sometimes there are Toastmasters clubs in just lots of major towns, but also some that are at a student level. So if you approach a club or an organization like Toastmasters, let them know that you're a student, an active student at Western Governors University, and see if there are any fees. Maybe there are some student levels that you can join. There is actually a Dale Carnegie. I'm sorry I didn't put that in the resources, but there is a Dale Carnegie website that can also be helpful to find out more about some communication skills, some interaction opportunities, maybe some activities and workshops. And don't underestimate volunteering. If you go to church, there could be some opportunities to volunteer in anywhere during the service or anywhere during, an event at a church organization or even a VFW, if you belong to a veteran group, things of that sort, that could always be helpful. Workshops, and I mentioned workshops even here at WGU that you could explore. Community colleges often offer individual sort of ad hoc courses that you can take, and sometimes they are on these business skill sets, and that can include communication, interpersonal skills, and like. Eventbrite, I might have misspelled that, I'm sorry. I don't think it's GHT. But Eventbrite is also where you can find events in your area. And then, of course, YouTube videos are easy and quick to access. Coursera and LinkedIn are other areas where you can maybe find some courses, just some ways and next steps and resources that's out there to explore. I wanted to share with you. So now I want to offer any Q&A for you all. And if you're thinking of questions and answers or questions for you today, while you do that, I'm going to go here and get to that link that I promised for the events and put that in here for you to use to look at. And I just wanted to give you, the opportunity, if you have received what you need from this workshop and you need to jump off, you're perfectly free to do that and welcome to take your leave. You will be getting an email with a copy of the recording here, so you will get that and maybe some other resources. If you do need to take your leave, I do appreciate you coming by. Here is our contact information that you will find. And again, I want to thank you for joining me today and your patience with some of the technical things, but definitely we're here to help. And if you have any questions, and there was one from Kathleen. So what was your transition from military to civilian like? Mine was okay. And I appreciate you asking that question. I ended my time on the reserve side. So I got a little bit of both of the best of both worlds. Use those words a little bit. So there was help. I mean, we separated. There was something like a TAPS program that was there, but also what I did, I talked to. I had a great supervisor. I had a great leader, and so I asked them, what's it like for you? Or what advice do you have as I'm separating? And so that became very helpful. Great, Mina. Oh, great. Military Veteran Community Toastmasters Club. That's excellent. I am going to take that and I'm going to put that in my resources, if you don't mind. And this is another great thing about these kind of gatherings too, is that we can share resources with each other. And so it's an excellent way to be able to do that. All right, folks. Well, thank you again.